And Shub. And I think, because Wendy Diamond feels overwhelmed right now, so she could not. But I asked you to earlier. No, sorry, Shreyas, we have moved on wherever you are. Sorry. But take a seat. What we want to move on to also is like Philanthropy 3.0 for a 361 firm. So we have some ideas in that regard. All right, Tom, 1 second. All right, we're gonna last panel. Take a breath. I was actually in the elevator between 33rd and 42nd. It said, breathe in, breathe out. It's not a bad thing. I try to do that for 5 minutes several times a day. All right, so I'm going to let you play cleanup on this one, the guy. But maybe Shub will go second to last. And I think Adrian, because what we're going to move is from like investing. You represent a hybrid. You're like your family office. Shh. Thomas, I love you, but okay. You invest like in a family office. You have a foundation, and so you're on both sides of this. Plus, part of what we try to do is with inclusion. So we're trying to, with you and your wife, what you're representing. But maybe you talk about how you think, not as an investor per se, but as maybe the more your foundation and your impact sides of what is Mendoza, or maybe you can pass that down. Kick us off.
It's interesting because, we actually just started our nonprofit last year and got our 501c3 at the end of the year. And the reason that we started it is that, we did that transition. We went into more sort of, the asset management, building funds. And it was funny because in the emerging manager room, there was a lot of conversation about education. And we didn't realize how much of a piece that was. So Tuesday, I was at Jefferies speaking to all the Black and Brown employees about venture and what we had built. And we realized that how much there was the need of this in the finance industry. And so we started Mendoza Impact because, we get approached by philanthropy all the time. Like, I can't walk out with someone being like, oh, come to my nonprofit. And about a year ago, we were sitting at a pitch of a nonprofit, and this nonprofit is saying, oh, we're going to raise $100 million, and we're going to do something that's extraordinary, and 10 million is going to go to the cause. And I'm just like, wait, what? I'm like, in my world, 90 million goes to the cost, 10% goes to operations. And they're like, oh, no, in nonprofit world, 5% actually of dollars that come in go to a cause. And I was like,
what?
Screech!
What? Who was?
Yeah,
what?
Literally, that was the nonprofit that told me. And the big ones, like the ones that you're talking about, they're a lot more efficient. But the small to medium ones, they are not. And so we were like, all right, how about we disrupt that? And 3 years ago, we built a fellowship program that has put more Black and Brown and women into jobs in venture capital than any other organization. And that was us not trying. And then it was like, all right, well, we did that. Let's focus on investor education. So we've been at Microsoft, Google, Betterment, talking about the Black and Brown and trying to get more people to start taking control of their finances. And then recently we were approached by a next-gen family office that was like, hey, we want to build a fund of fund. And we said, well, why don't we start using venture philanthropy? Let's get millions of dollars out to work, because we could all talk about making impact. We can all talk about getting more money to women. Well, let's move millions of dollars to do it, because we can sit there and have great conversations, or we could actually just do it. And so the new thing we're working on is to build programs for emerging managers, build programs to do fund to funds to support these first-time fund managers using philanthropic dollars, where we're trying to put 50 to 75% of all dollars given to work. And really for us, it's about, being the family, we started looking at the importance of that next gen that cares about impact, but also we're a family that's run by a woman and a Latino. When we raised, our wealth came because we had an exit from a tech company. We saw no investors that looked like us. And so it's really about making sure that we have a voice, but also that our capital carries that same impact when it goes out to the world. And you wouldn't believe how much out there that the need for that impact is just coming to us.
Yep. So I think this is a good sequence, because that was perfect. Now, Blue, you represent a destination for philanthropy capital. Maybe you could, and you've been in different such buckets, and you've been doing this on a global basis. So maybe you could talk about what you do, and then how you think of yourself as a steward.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here. I really appreciate the 361 Firm community. So I'm with Save the Children. We're an international nonprofit. Actually, offices are in Connecticut. We have a small office right across from the UN. We're 105 years old, 115 countries. We were started by a woman in the UK. Our current president is actually from Indonesia. Our past president was a woman as well. So, and I've been 35 years in the field, predominantly on the international side. I have also spent quite a bit of time on the medical side as well. So 7 years at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The role that I have at Save the Children is to work on the new conversations that are coming to the nonprofit sector. So if we aren't paying attention to innovation, the kinds of conversations that you're having, the next gen and the transfer of wealth, I think Mark says, what keeps you up at night? What keeps me up at night is that the gap of understanding gets wider. So we have to understand AI, we have to understand blockchain, we have to understand actually satellites, space, all these different things because they impact children on the ground.
You're gonna leave it at that? Okay. So Shub, taking all, you got a donor foundation, you have a recipient program, and you know what our vision is. And by the way, we almost launched 361 Foundation. It exists as a name and exists in all forms, but when I thought the idea of taking on money, then it's stewardship, it's fiduciary, and we weren't ready for that, so we stopped. So I said, all I want to do is just take inventory and help. Always have a philanthropy panel. We were doing that even before. And through Vikas, this is Vikas's son, Shub, I think as a community we're ready for it. And you have a model that I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. So we're partnering, and it's going to be community driven. So just tell them what we're about to do.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Shub. I'm the CEO of Impact Labs. Just quick background on what we're doing. We're building the world's most sophisticated nonprofit impact analysis engine and a platform that enables donors to give to causes that they're passionate about and track exactly where their money is going and who it's helping. That's what we're doing. Mark, to kind of answer your question on, what scares you, excites you.
Sure.
What scares me looking at the nonprofit ecosystem right now is that we're seeing a really interesting generational shift when it comes to next-gen donors, where the modern generation of donor is taking the same level of rigor and diligence that they apply to their for-profit initiatives, and they're expecting the same from the nonprofit portion of their portfolios. However, nonprofits are not often equipped to provide that level of data and analysis to donors. And what we're seeing is donations are starting to pool More and more donors now are defaulting to safer donations to large brand name organizations because
It's a
those
little
are the
bit like
ones.
the private equity world we were talking about, and the need for emerging managers, sort of a parallel
Absolutely.
themes.
Yeah. And what this pooling of donations is doing is it's kind of starving out a lot of these smaller grassroots organizations, the kind of boots on the ground, if you will. Those organizations are doing tremendous amounts of high impact work in very specific targeted communities, and they're starting to get starved out for funds. So that's kind of a paradigm that concerns me. I'm worried that we're heading towards a world where only a few large multinational nonprofits exist, the ones that can afford the large marketing programs to get their name out there. They obviously have their role and their purpose. However, if we're ever going to solve any of these issues that we're trying to solve, we need a wide range of organizations that can tackle it at every level. Now, the flip side of that is every challenge is an opportunity. If we look at the current generation of donor, millennials consider, 74% of millennials consider themselves to be philanthropists. This is a huge leap over, I believe, 48% of Gen X and 35% of the baby boomer generation. The current generation is passionate and they're motivated, and sure, we have high expectations, but that's okay. I think we have an opportunity here. I'll start with another stat. There is currently in the nonprofit system, the average donor retention rate hovers between 30 and 40%. That's really bad. Any of us who come from a SaaS background should be like, what? That should be 92%. What are you doing? I think we're in a position where we can design a modern donor experience that allows people to make data-driven, high-impact decisions easily. And if we're able to deliver that experience, we think that donor retention, we can double that. And we can unlock hundreds of billions of dollars in motivated, driven funding just domestically in the US. And now if we start putting our numbers behind that, making a model and an engine that can really drive that impact and that change, we can start taking a serious chunk out of these causes that we've been talking about for a long time. And that leads into what we're doing here with 361, Mark. I'd like to kind of present this opportunity to everybody in this room right now. We always talk about how through our companies and our investments, we're making the world a better place. I think it's time for us to, start putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to that. We should start getting serious about our philanthropic strategy at the same level that we're serious about our for-profit strategy. Thank you. And a part of that, if anybody's interested in learning more, in the breakout we can discuss this, we're launching our flagship 361 Philanthropic Fund. We'll be applying our impact analysis models and engines and creating a fund. The cause is not determined yet. We sent out a survey. We're trying to poll people. If you're interested, fill out the survey, let us know. And we'll be getting behind it. Everybody in this room has access to capital. Everybody in this room knows somebody or is somebody who's incredibly passionate about social issues. Let's get serious about it. Let's put some data behind it. Let's professionalize the experience. And let's make it easier to do good. That's the goal here.
So just to put some practical steps on that. So
Yeah.
first is the funnel, what everybody thinks that we should focus on first. And this came out of our London conference, where I think it was Rob Garrett and a few others were like, just pick one thing. Well, it's tough for me to pick one thing, but as a community, we'll pick one thing, and maybe next quarter we do another thing, and next quarter. But it's not just capital. It's value add, just like we're not vanilla money into a company, we're not vanilla money into philanthropy. We want to really, whether it's, and they're all interrelated, so it'll be a very interesting thing. And every Thursday at 10:30, if you all remember when the Ukraine war, every 7:30, every day, we got together and helped think of how we could help Ukraine. Same thing every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. We're now going to get back together, because I didn't know what to do with this, but now I've got a partner to lead it. And they do have a revenue model. They are raising money for themselves, and you mentioned that 10%. So their model, and I feel good about this, is that they will take 10%, not 90, 10%, but they're going to add a lot of value for both sides of the equation, both in terms of measurement, providing some choices and some other, there's some, it's their model, and I think I'm comfortable with it because we're going to do our first stab here. But I feel good that that's the part of 361 that hasn't scaled. And I feel like this should be our legacy. So I'm excited that this will come together. Now, you've heard what we're doing, what a large institution's doing, what a family office is doing. There's an AI for that, right? So what should AI, what role is AI going to provide on this side of the equation?
So I'm
Particularly
really
for a global network
Yeah.
community that wants to help. Right?
Totally. I mean, I'm really resonating with this message of save the children, save our children, but maybe not exactly in the way that you might have thought at first. For me, the thing that keeps me up at nights, because what's been happening with AI for the last 10 years has been my Oppenheimer moment. When I see so many of the technologies that folks like me helped pioneer getting deployed in ways online that are tearing us apart and undermining our institutions and our societies and our children's future. The thing is, our institutions have been deliberately built to evolve slowly. The Constitution was framed to evolve slowly, and it was not built with AI in mind. The pace of disruption from AI is exponential, and we are not keeping up. And that is a major threat to our civilization. In order to save our children, we can't just keep on trying to play catch up with what last year's AI was. We really need to set aside our wishful thinking, to recognize our unconscious biases in what we think we want AI to be and what we think AI is and isn't, and instead to realistically confront uncomfortable realities, uncomfortable trade-offs, uncomfortable rethinking that we need to do, and we need to be thinking about this ahead, much faster than we've ever succeeded in doing as a species. We need to understand not just what AI is today, but where it's going to be in just 2 years, which is, as I said earlier, gonna make your shock at GPT pale in comparison. It's still gonna, be increasing in the speed of disruption faster and faster. And we need to understand how that is going to impact human psychology. Because, I've been studying cognitive science and AI for like 40 some years. Most of us labor daily unaware of what our unconscious is doing, but those are like 95% of our mental processes. And the interaction of AI with that is what's endangering us. And we don't think about it because we have these comforting, warm, fuzzy myths of our own free will and self-determination and autonomy. And we don't realize how easily predicted and how easily manipulated we are, even unintentionally. Society, today, what I'm trying to get people to understand with this book, Raising AI, is that AI is neither, I saw this talk advertised a few weeks ago called AI, God or Slave. We need to come out of that 20th century mentality. The book Raising AI is about the fact that no, these are children. These are our artificial children. They're still neurodivergent. They're not fully formed well, but they're incredibly powerful already. What do you do when you have neurodivergent but extremely powerful, strong children? You'd better parent them right. And right from the outset of Raising AI, the question is, how's your parenting? Guess what? I'm sure if we surveyed 99% of us for what we think good parenting is, we are doing the polar opposite on our artificial children. Society today is already populated by both human children and 100 times that number of artificial children. Because for each one of us, we have our Facebook AI, we have our TikTok AI, we have our Snapchat AI, we have our Reddit AI, our YouTube AI, our Reddit, it goes on and on. There's 100 of them. Watching us 24/7, learning from our behavior, how we interact with people, what we reward, what we share, what we don't pay attention to, our manners, everything. And then they go and they imitate them like an adoring toddler and reflect it back into society. Let me ask you, what would happen if collectively the entire population of the world said, doesn't matter how I raise my child. Have you ever heard a human parent say, there are 8 billion other humans out there, how I raise my child is a drop in the bucket, it doesn't matter? What would happen to civilization if we did that? It'd fall apart in one generation. Guys, that's where we are today. And we need to do something about that. We need to think much less shallowly than the narrative we're hearing in the media today about how to build really new checks and balances against the unintended consequences of the AIs that are shaping our culture today far more than the most powerful human influencer. AIs are the most powerful influencers in the world today. And so please join our efforts in saving the children.
So what I'm hearing, well done, well struck. I'm hearing, Shub, is we're basically canvassing for where do we start. He's making a pitch for this, right? Which could be an interesting twist. What we want to do is figure out that you might be right. But we need to get behind raising AI as the biggest impact. But that's, there's so many things we need to do, but that's an overarching thing that I don't think we're really focused on.
That was the question, the last panel, like what's the next thing after AI? It's more AI. And if we continue to raise the AIs wrong, what happens to their children and their children? We need to get that right.
Yep,
right?
I hear you.
And the philanthropy part of it, just to tie this in, right? This is the sort of thing that the free market will not fund. It's a race to the bottom right now. And this is why I see a need both for the philanthropy, but also, as we know, just philanthropic approaches can't sustain enough revenue to go up against the 800-pound gorillas. And so you do need a 360-degree plan. And it may start with tiny amounts of philanthropy for what we're doing. But one of the reasons for how we're approaching this time, where the small pot of patrons right now get first allocation when we roll out the new tech to deal with these problems in 6 to 12 months' time, is because you want to build a core of seed investors who are completely committed and aligned to the vision. Right, we do not want. I wrote a New York Times article when OpenAI blew apart and they tried to fire Sam Altman. I knew 3 of the people on the board, Ilya and Tasha McCauley, and I knew Mira Murati. So I was kind of in the middle of that, like just a couple of months before. I was with them a couple of months before that happened, right? And the thing is, we do not want a repeat of that. We need to understand the mission. We need to align any for-profit things that spin out of that, because it does have immense power, but it has to have a deployment in a way that is healthy for humanity, to Esther Dyson's point. It's like, and I'm sure what you heard from Esther Dyson was heavily spurred by the interview I did with Esther, because she was like, oh, wow. I think we really need to get on top of this, and it can't just be a small group of us talking about that. That's great. We need to move the entire public to understand and wrap their heads around that. And that's important for several reasons. Politicians do not come unless the public is there. During Climate Week, I was in a closed session. Next to me was a member of the Clinton administration, former member, and he was like, Takai's completely right. I told Bill Clinton, we need to do this about climate. And Bill said, sorry, I can't do that. Public isn't there. We need to move the public faster than we've ever done before. And yes, media is the way to do it.
It's interesting because you mentioned the heroin is sort of how we have to do it, unfortunately. Like we have this social media, which is our heroin. We were talking about China. And we were talking about it was the first protest, physical protest, and then they went away. But the biggest protest is when they spend a little more time, and that's being monitored by the Chinese authorities, on something, and then that's when they'll get it. That's when they have to change. And the same thing here. All right, 361 tradition questions. Questions from everyone. All right, Bubba. Here.
It's something you started saying in previous panel. It's just AI and democracy. If you could say a little more, or maybe even tie in media.
We have, in the U.S. we have what's called there are different ways to implement democracy, right? So if you talk to the people who are more in the political sciences and stuff, we've implemented something called an adversarial democracy, as opposed to a pluralistic democracy. What happens when you get AI into the picture is that AI is deciding for us hundreds of times a day on this, not just what 10, 20 things to put in front of our eyes, it's also deciding what trillions of things on the net never to show you. And that is the unconscious manipulation. Everybody's talking about, even after Cambridge Analytica or whatever, people are talking about, the AIs just put these things in front of your eyes that outrage you and fire you up and drive you into misinformation and all that kind of stuff. What is still missing from the conversation, no, the real unconscious psychological manipulation of our population is what the AI algorithms decide to never show you, to never show me. That's what causes us not to understand. This is what causes one side to think that the other side is not just wrong, but actually bad or evil. That's what drives the demonization that slides into dehumanization. And we're seeing the fractures that's creating in our country. And the same thing is happening geopolitically around the world. And in an era where AIs are commoditizing weapons of mass destruction, not just meshed fleets of lethal armed drones that we're seeing in Ukraine, but also in Myanmar and Sudan, living room technologies. The RAND Institute had a report this past year showing, talking about how AI is commoditizing the kind of genetic engineering for biowarfare, making that into a living room technology. Imagine arming drones with that. And now you put this into the hands of anybody who has been polarized to the point of thinking, the other side is evil and is dehuman and needs to be destroyed. Would you take a bet? A few more questions. Yeah, sorry.
Just to lead off of the last question and what you're saying, there's a saying that you can't use old data or information to solve new problems. And that's exactly what AI is doing right now. It's using old data based on an old system to come up with answers like this. So I agree with the last comment, whereas, humanity needs to own and decide and to actualize their own power and their own future. And it needs to be a democratic process to do that, because if we're looking at human versus AI, AI is running faster than humans are, and it's based on old human behavior, old data, old systems. And so if we follow that model of the past, it is a disastrous future, but if we actually own the process and the future, that's a completely different dynamic. So I would say it is a fundamental shift in psychology and consciousness of humanity to decide who really is in power. Is it the old system or the new system?
Let me pass that, but I just want to say what you just said is representativeness heuristic. That is one of our hundreds of unconscious cognitive biases. Humans have it too. Both humans and AIs suffer from representativeness heuristics, which means that we use past things that superficially look similar to try to predict the future, and it works 90% of the time. But when something's totally different, it fails, and we need to be aware of that.
I want to say that you're completely right, because if we try to use right now data, statistical significance is 10,000 data points to make a decision. And if you were to go into, as an investment professional, and say, who should I invest in? The answer will come up to only 2% of money will go to women, because the data is the old data that has been sort of what we've seen now. And I think we have to start looking at more intentionality of how we make decisions. And I think there will be a large portion of the population that's just going to use, whatever the ChatGPT gives you. But, I think when you look at the need of a feedback loop in terms of whether or not a decision was made, that's what I love what she was working on. We're actually talking next week with the RED about let's start not just doing data in the beginning, but data at the end, after a decision, an investment was made, and what happens. because we need to take all of that data, dump it back into the big tank of data to say, no, this was a female-led business that's doing really well, and we have to change our view of how do we categorize and record decisions. Because right now, you know, if you look at the data, it's only going to say white guys that went to Stanford, no offense to white guys that went to Stanford, are those the guys that actually are going to produce alpha? Because alpha could be different things. It could be social impact. It could be jobs created. It could be, you know, children saved. And I think it's on us as investment professionals to be that intentional decision, but also start re-looking at how we're choosing. You know, we tell a lot of people in talking about investment professionals, when you're sort of to get them to think about how to make decisions, is what's the framework you're going to use? There's a traditional framework on ARR and CAC and LTV, you know, all the startups use, but all right, well, what else is going to influence your decision? Is there impact involved? And I think what, you know, at the same time, it was funny because in Monday, what came out of the White House meeting was there was people talking about where the money was going and there's this dollars. And you know what we ended up doing is to say, look, let's take a step back. We're all complaining that dollars aren't going to the right place, they're not going to the right people. You know what? You guys have data on this. What the state of Massachusetts did, what the state of Virginia did, what this state here, you should present us the data to verify that actually a correct investment decision. If you want it to affect underrepresented communities, then show us the data. And show us that there is actually a checks and balances that is necessary, because I think we can go down the rabbit hole about political decisions and how we're going to, you know, measure AI and how we're going to guard against it, but it really takes about the verification of data. And we as, you know, more Americans, you know, in this country to start looking at how a decision was made. And I think what we're going to see in the next 3 to 5 years, just like there was in the ad tech space of this is a paid ad, to start digging into how is a decision made for me.
You know, I have to give credit to the Europeans. Europeans are better at this.
Oh yeah,
They're also
much
better at regulating, but they do think
but
about
they
this better than
sometimes
we do.
overregulate.
They do.
Can I?
Blue wants to add something.
I just want to say I think it's really valuable to have representation from the nonprofit sector, like in community, talking about this. Over time, what I've noticed is that we have a lot to learn from you. Also, we're on the front lines, right? So I heard a philanthropist in Seattle say, which really stuck with me about 10 years ago, she said, you need actually the large, the medium, the small nonprofits. Because, so for example, large nonprofit, right? We have resources, we have skill set to like look at the data, do all these things, but we also have the capacity to give back to the medium and the small. And it's imperative, actually, that we have the small.
You do, but there's this conflict. There's all a bunch of management agency issues in this whole philanthropic world that
Well,
it
yeah.
just disturbs me.
And I'll say a couple of things. One is
Like mafias. Sorry.
I-
Not you,
that's
but
a new
just
that's a new subject for me. I'll have to learn about that. But I would say on the topic of, you know, localization is an important topic. Save the Children is one that is really pushing that agenda, because we know that, like, we, big organization, can say what we think should happen, but it's the people on the ground, it's representation that actually needs to have a seat at the table. And if we don't build that up, then great, we can give funds, but that's not sustainable. So we as a large organization need to champion that, and we are, and there are others. But that diversification is really important.
So look, we're sort of past time. I'm inclined, running a little audible here. It seems like we have two themes. There's the philanthropy thread and the industry thread, and AI goes in intertwines in both. I'm inclined to, well, I'm of two minds, and you guys can vote. We can just continue this town hall, and they're intertwined, or if you want to really focus on the industries, we could. It's actually cooler upstairs, so that might be a draw to go to that, and then the philanthropy stays here, or vice versa. And we can just continue this discussion. We've done our first impact summit. We didn't break up. We just kept on going. So it's up to you. What do you want to do? Sort of industries in one section and philanthropy in another section, and then come back together? Or we continue to talk, just town hall style. Or you can break and talk. There is wine. So town hall style, hands up, just a few, okay? And then break up into industries on one level and philanthropy discussion on another level. That seems to be the winner. All right, how many for philanthropy related? And then how many for like industries related? Well, this is the bigger space. So I would say industries related stays here and philanthropy goes to the cooler 42nd floor and grab a drink on the way. And then we'll come back and figure out what everyone learned. All right? Thank you, everyone. All right. Thank you, sir.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.